Hello and welcome to another show. Since the last episode, I attended Broadmeadows Magistrates Court in relation to impersonation of a government official, which I'm pleading not guilty to. The case was adjourned for a summary conference with prosecution. I'm in the process of organising that. My next court date is on October 24th. Any support is much appreciated. There's links in the description for how you can go about doing that. But on to today's show. I have a very special guest. Former New Zealand candidate Billy Te Kahika is joining us. We're here to discuss his arrest, the ongoing situation with the New Zealand freedom movement, and the tyranny that everyone is experiencing there from government and its media partners. So let's cross over to that interview now. Hi, Billy. I'm proud to welcome you onto the show. What you've done for the New Zealand people is truly remarkable, and you've been through hell and back in the process. How are you managing there today?
Really good, and thanks for having me on your show. It's great to be with you, Jeff. As you've been watching things unfold here in New Zealand, I've been watching things unfold in Australia and, of course, in Victoria, and have been watching the tyranny that you've been living under with Premier Andrews. But I'm holding up well. We're still involved in a court case for protest charges. The government has levelled two types of charges against me. The first charge is for protesting against lockdown harm, which I did in 2021 on August the 18th. As you'll be aware, I've got a significant amount of profile in New Zealand, and I've heard from so many people about the harm that lockdowns cause and were causing, suicide, business destruction, marriage ending, relationships ending, all that sort of stuff. And I felt compelled when they announced another level 4 lockdown to stand up against the harm and to try and fight for a voice for the New Zealand people that were basically pleading with the government to take note that the harm that they're causing with the lockdowns was far out of proportion. The lockdowns was, basically just monumental. The government weren't listening. I felt compelled to protest about the harm, and subsequently got arrested for it. But on that day, I want to make special tribute. I live in a very rural part of North New Zealand, and on the first day of the lockdown, we had a 14-year-old girl in my community hang herself because of lockdown anxiety, and that's the very thing that I wanted to protest about, and I was arrested for that. And normally what they were doing, they would sort of arrest someone and release them after a couple of hours or so. They kept me in New Zealand's largest prison for about 28 hours, and with no intention of letting me go. We had a judge that basically wasn't prepared to keep me indefinitely, and he got me out. We had incredibly harsh bail conditions, myself and my partner in crime, Vinnie Eastwood, and we're still living through that today.
You held a protest during the level 4 lockdowns and simply outlining the devastation caused, and then you've been unfairly targeted.
Yeah, that's essentially that's the core of it. It was a very small protest, about 80 of us, and I'd always worked with the police. I'm a former member of the New Zealand Army and New Zealand Police. I was volunteer for the volunteer firefighting service. Making sure that public protesters and police were safe was a primary concern of mine. Always when doing protests, I worked with the police. They sort of made out that we were all going to be fine, and that they would warn me and tell me to stop, and if I didn't, I might be subject to arrest. I was arrested, and then instead of being released after 2 or 3 hours, they kept me in for 28 hours. And the police opposed bail. They wanted to keep me in until I was going to basically buckle under and admit guilt to something. But the New Zealand Bill of Rights Act 1990, Jeff, guarantees the right to peaceful assembly and the right to freedom of expression and speech. And so I claim that, and either the Bill of Rights is a guarantor and a protector of a citizen's rights and protection from government overreach, or it's not. And we're about to find out about that. I'm facing a second group of charges as well. They've trumped up charges to do with the Electoral Act in New Zealand. I stood for election in 2020 at the New Zealand general elections. I led the largest freedom party ever constructed in the shortest amount of time in history. I was voted the third preferred prime minister in a very, very serious Commonwealth Brunton news poll. From there, we had 60 candidates. I had 80,000 people in our support network. We had the third largest amount of candidates, of members in the party. And then at the end of it, they told us we had 30,000 votes, which just didn't add up because, I mean, simply, 2 months out from the election, we had about 6.5 million people engagements in the messaging. And most of that was supportive. And then, seriously, big movement. But at the end of it, we got, they told us that we got 30,000 votes, which we felt far beyond worried about that now. But and now they've claimed that I knowingly fiddled my declarations for the electoral declarations that you got to do after the election, which of course I wouldn't. And I worked with the Electoral Commission to submit my report, and they knowingly helped me to get it right, because I'm a smart man, but I'm not good at all things, and report writing like that is not my forte at all. And I worked with the Electoral Commission to do that, and then at the end of it, because it took me 3 times to get it right, and they allowed me to submit my report 3 times, they then reported me to the police for breaching the Electoral Act for submitting my report 3 times to get it right. So that case hasn't been seen until February. So I'm starting to feel a bit picked on, Jeff.
Yes, it definitely appears that way. And all your amazing accomplishments, being a front runner for the New Zealand Prime Minister, and they obviously seen you as a threat. And we know corruption is rife all throughout the political system. They didn't want you to threaten the establishment and everything that's been put in place. Jacinda Ardern, with everything that she's been coached on with the World Economic Forum, they didn't want you to come through and rock the boat and stand up for human rights. That's exactly how it looks, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does, because what I'd done is I basically identified every tentacle of the evil octopus, if you like. I looked at and exposed, Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, Agenda 2050. I exposed the World Economic Forum program. I exposed, the climate change tyranny that was coming down the pipeline, consistencies, contradictions, and dishonesty with that. And but it wasn't just limited to that. It was also far beyond that, where I was talking about sensible economics, just applying logical thought to how we can run a country much better for the citizenry, so that the citizens of New Zealand actually have a voice and are heard. But what we do have in New Zealand, very similar to Australia, we have a corporate system. It's a beast. It's ignorant to the concerns of any citizen in New Zealand, and it's on a program. And I basically talked about all of that, thinking that I was the only nut job that was thinking it. But out of that, literally hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people joined me on the rally, and still remains at the moment the key tool that they're using to destroy rights and freedoms. But as I'm telling everyone now, get ready for climate change, because it's coming. Climate change tyranny is going to be the one that'll finish the job.
Yeah, it certainly is. It's a multifaceted plan to restrict our rights and liberties. And you've been on the forefront doing your best for the people there, and the support has been overwhelming. Many people are definitely on your side. And yeah, the system there, they don't like that. Anyone that's trying to step in and interfere with Agenda 21, they do their best to try and silence and eliminate their political opponents. It's very much dirty politics that you're immersed in, isn't it?
Oh, it's filthy. And the thing that's most surprising really is how dirty it is, even amongst the so-called freedom fighting political leaders. It's to me, the very thing that we are opposing, which is arrogancy, which is self-serving nepotism, coming from a place of hatred, coming from a place of self-centeredness, centralization are the things that we are meant to be opposing. Yet we now have players and actors in the so-called freedom movement that are displaying the exact same traits of which we're trying to combat, and that's basically, what I've been promoting lately is that I believe that New Zealand freedom movement has been hijacked. I believe it's been twisted out of shape into something that's completely different to what we had in 2020. And now what we need now is a truth movement, because the truth can't be argued with. And I'm not talking about my truth or your truth, Jeff. It's the truth that I'm talking about. And whichever way you kind of skin the cat, truth is truth. And I believe that that's the foundation of any good freedom movement. I'm a pastor, and I believe what the Bible says, that that if we seek the truth, that's a good thing, because the truth will set us free and make us free.
It certainly will, and unfortunately, that seems to be a common theme all throughout. And people stepping in, controlled opposition, infiltration, those that are coming through to hijack the movement for their own ends and means, and trying to censor and silence others. What we've seen here is long-term veterans of the movement, and they've been pushed aside and not being given certain privileges to speak. And it's affecting so many people on different levels. And that's been a common theme right throughout history, unfortunately. Now, during this whole protest, the government has been desperate to silence both you and Vinny, and even preventing you both from speaking to one another. Their fear of the exposure from independent media. Is that how you see it?
Yeah, exactly. So we've just had that bail condition lifted. So we're working together. We're working on a documentary right now, which is going to expose government and media corruption and collusion and misinforming and manipulating public perception, etc. around. Going back to the point you just made, Jeff, about the controlled opposition and how they are squeezing out long-term activists and controlling who speaks, controlling what's being said, how it's being said. That's exactly what's happened here. We've got two organisations, one called the Freedom and Rights Coalition and one called Voices for Freedom. And, they've done exactly that. They've tried to corporatise and centralise the entire freedom movement into their organisations. And, they won't let anyone speak at any rally that they are running. And, for example, if I turned up, and I was certainly, at the very, very forefront, and, I don't think anybody's really got the same, or had the same amount of profile that I had at that time in 2020. They wouldn't let me speak at a rally like that. We've got instances where these same organisations won't let their people go to other rallies ran by other people like myself. They've got to sort of pre-approve what they put on their protest cards, all that sort of stuff. And to me, there's a difference between centralisation and coordination. Coordination is no problem, but what they've done is for their own purposes. And I don't think those purposes and motivations that they have are genuine. I think there's something behind it. And I think it's about self-serving, which is very concerning. And they've set up these organisations, and they've basically hijacked the entire freedom movement. I mean, we've even got a media channel here called the Platform, which is ran by one of our long-term radio journalists, Sean Plunkett. Now, Sean Plunkett in 2020 was one of the greatest enemies to the freedom movement and to our plight, to get the truth out there, to wake people up. I mean, he was a bitter enemy of ours. And now he's created the Platform, and he's promoting himself as resistance media. And I just cannot believe, and he's actually working with those same organizations that are trying to manipulate and control the freedom movement. He's working with them. And that, to me, it kind of smells like a dead fish, Jeff.
It is a horrific problem, and I've witnessed it here. The extensive lengths that people go to, the people that have infiltrated the community, trying to stop others, even holding events on different days. And even in the beginning, when they stepped in, a lot of people made no effort to introduce themselves to veteran activists. There was no communication. If anything, it was quite the opposite. It falls back into the divide and conquer techniques that are being used. And it's definitely counterproductive when this is all put in place, and smear campaigns that are put over the top, as well as egos, people jockeying for donations and subscribers. They lose sight of the goal, which is to restore peace and prosperity back to the country. It's very vicious and very sad to see, isn't it?
Oh, it is, and that's the thing. You know, I mean, everybody that started this work in 2020 did it at great risk. And, you know, I've lost my international performing career out of it. I've lost my business, you know, immeasurable amount of slander and harm, lost so-called friends, even lost family, and, you know, and lost an income. So back then, you know, it was the people that started to support me and basically so I could feed my family and myself. And then, you know, then suddenly, you know, people sort of twigged on it that, oh, hold on a second, we can capitalize on this. And next minute, you've got these same organizations that I've mentioned that are, you know, have got professional merchandising aspects to the organization, you know, and, you know, taking, you know, money from people when it's done on a corporate basis, rather than a basis where, well, actually it's the cause that first. Secondly, I love to pay my bills and feed my family, you know, and but to them it's the other way around. And really, what they're jockeying for at the end of it is the 2023 general elections next year, and it's going to be a dog's breakfast. And you know, I mean, quite frankly, Jeff, in my humble opinion of how I've assessed each of these so-called freedom leaders, is that they're just incapable, and it really does concern me that you know, they're incapable from a technical point of view, but in a leadership point of view. But on the other hand, you know, just where are their hearts? And that's probably the first thing you'd be looking for in a candidate that you want to put into any position of authority. Is, you know, where is their heart? Where, you know, where they're coming from. And one of the things I say quite often is the best person to have a job of authority is the very person who doesn't want it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a very good saying, and it rings a lot of truth as well. And ultimately, as a result, what we've seen is different groups being fractured off, and people following individual campaigns, doing podcasts by themselves, circulating petitions, or just working in small, tight-knit groups instead of everybody coming together. So, you know, in saying that, we did have a good show of support up in Canberra. We went to Parliament House in Australia, and it seemed like some people were putting their differences aside for the greater good. We still have to remain hopeful and positive, and try not to be distracted by some of the negative energy that comes forward, and focus on our own situation, legal.
Absolutely.
And the campaigns that we're on. A lot of prominent figures like ourselves as well have been hit with numerous charges, and they've used that tactic here, charge stacking in Australia, trying to weigh people down with court cases to try and slow down the progress. And we got the courts all clogged here up in Australia. I'd imagine it'd be the same there. People with breach of chief health officers' directives, and just an ongoing stream of cases before the courts. Is that the situation at hand there?
Yeah, it's exactly the same here. I mean, there's literally hundreds of people that are facing different, what we have, Health Response Act breaches, and it is clogged up. I mean, meanwhile, you've got, you know, gang members, you know, that are getting let off crimes. You've got them not being chased up, you followed through, and they're focusing on people like myself that have never ever been in trouble with the law, You know, I mean, jeepers, last time I got a growling from a policeman, I was 16, 17 years of age. I'm 50 now. And I've, you know, since then I've swum a lot of water, you know, going under the bridge. And, you know, I've never been in trouble with the law that way. And to be in front of a court at the age of 50 is something, you know, I would never have thought of, you know, as being possible in my life, really. But they are, the system, the court system's very, very clogged up. You've got, like my case now and Vinny's case, I mean, we were arrested on August the 18th. You know, we're now well into September. We found out yesterday that we won't know the verdict for our charges until the 25th of November. And each time that we have an appearance and our lawyers have to work, well, mine anyway, that's $3,000 a pop. Yeah. And, you know, I don't have a you know, a guaranteed income as such. It's a donation amount of work that I do. You know, what I say to people is, look, if you want to support me in my freedom work research and broadcasting, my ministry or my legal fees, this is how you support me, and I'll provide them my you know, my working bank account so that I can do this job. And you know, I've got a lot of beautiful people supporting me, and but you know, it's so far it's cost about $20,000, and it's going to be more by the time they're finished with me. So I think these are a measure of not only having the court system clogged up, but I think they're using just, you know, financial attrition to wear us down.
Yes, it's very much corrupt the way that whole system is structured, and you deserve all the support and donations you can get, because a win for you is a win for all of New Zealand. And your impeccable history and all your accomplishments, that should have been factored in, and then you should have been shown immense leniency at court. You shouldn't have never had to have done any time behind bars. What was the treatment that you received in the New Zealand prison system?